Hey, welcome to Candid Conversation number 718. Today we're asking the question, what does it mean to set your affection on things above? Colossians 3:2 says, set your affection on things above, not on things of the earth. What does that mean? And that question struck me because my grandfather, he used to say about how people in the church, a lot of the people in the church were he'd say they're so heavenly minded, they're no earthly good. And what he meant by that was that their religion or their belief wasn't practical. It was like they gave up everything for the church. I remember one church I used to attend, not the church I grew up in, but a different church. They talk about, you got to count the cost, when you're saved. You got to count the cost, giving up everything for Jesus. And there's this attitude that can permeate sometimes in churchianity where you got to, and the way they interpret set your affection on things above or think on heavenly things, is you do that to the exclusion of the earthly things. So, yeah, I remember my grandfather, he had a stroke and he was in the hospital. And he said about how he had people from the church come to visit him. And they'd say, we love you, brother, we're praying for you. But then when it came to practical stuff like, can you peel this banana for me? Can you get me a cup of water? Or can you do these little things that I need done because half of my body is paralyzed? Well, no, they wouldn't do that. It was like they were just so set upon making sure they go and attend every church service. Stay and speak in tongues longer than anybody else. And just think on the things of the church and the things they do there, that when it comes to the practical stuff, like taking care of a house, taking care of, my grandfather with the stroke, taking care of practical stuff, it was like they were no earthly good. They didn't really do that because they're thinking, I'm thinking on the Lord. And a lot of times, and I think this was a legalistic church, so I could see that there. And then the other church I mentioned had legalistic leanings itself, where they mentioned how, you got to just, when you're saved, you can't just come to church and believe the gospel. That's easy believism. You've got to count the cost, where you give up everything for Christ. And so it's like, can you help me move today? I really need help. Oh no, I got to go to prayer meeting. Or I got to go to church. Well, can you help me with this other thing? Well, no, I've got to do this or I got to do that. And in other words, their faith wasn't that practical. And it's like, especially in legalistic churches like that, they'll smile at you and say, praise the Lord, glad to see you. And they're not going to yell at you or do things that are considered unchristian-like. But when it comes to sharing God's love with others, they fail in that area because they're so worried about losing their salvation or making themselves look good in heavenly ways. It's like, no, I'm not gonna take you to that baseball game because the advice to members say that we shouldn't gather in a large crowd like that where there's potentially some drinking going on. So no, you can't go to that. Or there's a school dance for your prom, or so. No, you can't do that because that's not Christian to dance. So you have all these rules, and they're so worried about trying to look good to others, like they are set apart, they're different when it comes to the spiritual things, that when it comes to the practical things, they're failing in that. And that was the thing my grandfather would say all the time about those people in that church. They're so heavenly minded, they're no earthly good. But really, when it says, set your affection on things above, that's a real practical thing. Because what it does is, your whole attitude changes. It's the love of Christ coming through you. So then it don't really concern you or bother you a bit if something bad happens to you, because like 2 Corinthians 4 says, verse 17, for our light affliction, which is but for a moment, worketh for itself a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. while we look at the things which are not seen. The things which are not seen are eternal, but the things which are seen are temporal. In fact, the temporal comes first, then the eternal. But anyway, so the problem with legalism, or you're so heavenly minded you're no earthly good, is that it's not too practical, because it's like people are trying to, in their flesh, look good to others or to God so that they can justify that they are going to heaven. So they're not focused on heavenly things. They'll say they are, but they're not really focused on heavenly things. They're focused on trying to accomplish the spiritual in a fleshly way. Galatians 5:17 says, the flesh lusteth against the spirit, and the spirit against the flesh. And these are contrary the one to the other, so that you cannot do the things that you would. Paul says that to a bunch of people who were saved, but they're following legalism. And just 2 verses before, in Galatians 5:15, he says, if you bite and devour one another, take heed ye be not consumed one of another. That's what that church was doing when they're saying, oh, I just thank the Lord. I'm rejoicing every day, brother. I just think, God is just so good to me. I thank the Lord for all he's done for me. And it's all this spiritual talk. And, maybe you do thank the Lord for all he's done for you. But it's just a form of godliness is what they're doing. And they're just so concerned with looking good to the other person, is that you bite and devour one another. My legalistic performance of the spiritual things, my flesh trying to accomplish what the Spirit has already accomplished in me, the Spirit of God, my legalistic attempts at that need to be better than your legalistic attempts, so that I look more godly than you. Unfortunately, that's what, when it says set your affection on things above, that's what most people, especially in a legalistic environment, that's what they think of. And so a lot of times, you may have some unsaved good old boy, as they call it in the South, some unsaved person, but he'll do anything for you, Whatever you ask, he'll be glad to help you out. He's always about helping others, but yet your church friend who goes to church all the time and is always talking about the Lord and the things of God, they won't do anything for you, because they're so worried about themselves. They're so focused on themselves, making themselves look good, that they don't help anybody else out. So they're so heavenly minded, they're no earthly good. But when God says to set your affection on things above, not on things of the earth, it's not what he's talking about, because those legalists are really setting their affection on things on the earth, not on the things above. They'll say it's the things above, but it's just like the Pharisees. It says they wear these long garments, and they wear their phylacteries and their borders on their garments. They love it when men in the market call them rabbi or father. They love the praise of men more than the praise of God. And so to try to get the praise of men, they'll talk about God and spiritual things and the things of the Bible, but they try to accomplish, or they frame it in a fleshly way. And so they are really following the lust of the flesh and trying to look good and spiritual to you. I remember one guy, when I went to the Calvary Chapel Bible College, they had outsourced, they had a little printer guy there who made t-shirts and things, and I bought a hoodie, and it had the Calvary Chapel logo on it and 2 Timothy 2:15 on the back, and I bought that online, and I just happened to look on there and see it, and I thought, oh, that's a good price, and I bought it. Well, so then I go to pick it up, and it's just this little print shop close to the church, and he tells me that the pricing was wrong on the website, that it should have been, I don't know, like $10 or $15 more. Well, I didn't know anything about it, but he says, but I'm going to honor that price, because you just bought one. I'm going to honor the price that you, by the way, I already paid for it. It had the amounts on the website, and I already paid for it. I didn't agree to a higher price, didn't know anything about that. And so he mentions how it was really, it should have been this higher price. And, but he says, but it's okay. It's not my money anyway. It all belongs to the Lord, so it's okay that, that you got this lower price. It's like he's trying to guilt me. He's bringing the Lord into it by trying to guilt me into thinking somehow I'm robbing God because it's really God's money, and I'm cheating God out of $10 or $15 because I didn't pay the regular price, even though I paid whatever price is on there, not knowing what the regular price was. What do you mean? How is this? So it's all God's money. So, well, if it's all God's money and you want to serve the Lord, then why wouldn't you try to get the full price? It seems like if it's all God's money, his attitude is like, well, it's all God's money, so it doesn't matter to me. Well, it should be the opposite. If it's all God's money, you should care about it. I know personally, if I'm buying something, then I'm responsible for that. But if someone gives me their money and says, well, will you buy this for me, find this for me and buy it for me? Well, I'm going to try to find the best deal, because I'm trying to help that person out. I'm not trying to price gouge them. So I'm trying to get a good deal for them, more so than I would for myself, because I want them to be happy with what I've done. If it's me and I don't mind spending more, well, I can go ahead and do it because I'm okay with that. But the other person, I don't know what they're okay with. So I try to get the best deal possible. So if it's really God's money, as he says, then it seems like he would say, well, can't you give an extra, or at least give an extra $10 in the offering at church? Or, don't give it to me, give it to the offering. He didn't say anything like that. It was more or less, look at what a good, godly person I am, that my whole business, I'm not out to try to make a fast buck. I'm trying to please the Lord here. And unfortunately, that's the attitude that a lot of people seem to have, especially in the legalistic environments, when it comes to the things of the Spirit. They try to accomplish it in a fleshly way. And so that's why my grandfather used to say, well, they're so heavenly minded, they're no earthly good. But if you are truly doing what Colossians 3:2 says, to set your affection on things above, not on things of the earth, then it's actually just the opposite. Because setting your affection on things above means that you're thinking of who you are in Christ, letting Christ live in you. And we are told, once we're saved, that we are ambassadors for Christ. Our job is to reconcile people to God. And you do that in two ways, because God has a twofold purpose, will. 1 Timothy 2:4 says, God wants all men to be saved. That's the first part. And then God wants all men to come into the knowledge of the truth. That's the second part. So the way I reconcile people to God as an ambassador for Christ is that if someone's not saved, then I look for an opportunity to share the gospel with them. So now, then they're saved. And so they're reconciled to God that way. Spiritually speaking, there's salvation from hell. But if someone's already saved, then I'm looking to reconcile them back to God in terms of having them walk in the Spirit and not fulfill the lust of the flesh. So I would be trying to get them sound doctrine or something that would get them to stop walking in the flesh and use the mind of Christ, presenting their bodies a living sacrifice and living by the faith of the Son of God. And so then I'm reconciling them to God in a practical way. In their daily walk, in their daily life, they are doing what the Lord would have them to do rather than their own flesh. And so if I set my affection on things above, well, I'm thinking of those things. I'm thinking of all the things that are of God, the love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. I'm thinking of how God is going to reconcile all things back to himself through Christ. I'm thinking how that I want Christ living in me, using the mind of Christ, to be just a small part of that reconciliation process. And so then, if that's the way I'm looking at it, then I'm, as 2 Corinthians 4:18 says, then I'm focused on the eternal, not on the temporal. Which means that if you want me to peel that banana for you, or get you a cup of water, or go down to McDonald's and get you a chocolate milkshake or something, then It's not, oh, well, I can't do that, brother. I got to go to church, or I got to read my Bible, or I got to listen to a sermon, or I got to read this Christian book. No, it's, you're looking at it and saying, this is an opportunity to share God's love to that person. It doesn't matter about my spirituality and trying to look good to you so that you say, oh, wow, it's not my money anyway, it's all God's. Wow, that sure is a godly person, that they don't, all the work that they do for their business, they're not greedy, they just think it all belongs to God. See, it's not about having that image with that other person, but it's about reconciling them back to God, being ambassadors for Christ. And if I go get that chocolate milkshake, or peel that banana, or get that cup of water, or whatever it is for them, then I'm not greedy and saying, well, that'll cost me $5, and that'll take me 30 minutes round trip back and forth, and I got to put miles on my car, and I was really wanting to do this or that, and I got to do this other thing. Well, if you've set your affection on things above, then it doesn't matter what you want to do. And say, well, I really wanted to go shop and get some new clothes, but the shirts that I'm wearing, they'll hold out another week. Or, I was really wanting to get me something to eat, but, I can wait another hour to help this person out. I can get food later. So I'm setting aside my own thoughts and needs and wants, because I'm not focused on the things of my flesh and the things that are temporal, but I'm focused on the eternal. And sure, what I'm doing for the other person is a fleshly thing too, peeling the banana, or getting the cup of water, or getting that chocolate milkshake. Those are fleshly needs. But if I do it for the other person rather than myself, then it's an opportunity to share God's love with them. If someone, when my grandfather, he says he's in the hospital with that stroke, and he asked somebody to peel the banana for him because his left side of his body is paralyzed. So how's he? Or right side was paralyzed. So how is he going to, no, it was his left side. How is he going to peel the banana? Because he needs two hands for that, and he couldn't figure it out. So how am I sharing the love of Christ when I say, well, I got to go and visit this other person, or I got to go do this or that, and you won't even take the time to peel the banana for him? That was his objection. He'd been in that church for 50 years, there at every service. And now he's in need, and he's helped other people, for all those years doing everything. And now you won't even peel the banana for him? Well, you went to visit him because then it looks good. Where you can say, oh yeah, I went to visit, him in the hospital. It shows, that's something they can brag about. But when it comes to the practical stuff of peeling the banana, they don't care. So they're saying, well, I got to go visit somebody in this other rest home. Well, you're less like the person who needs you to peel the banana is less likely to be reconciled to God through either sound doctrine or through the gospel if you won't even do something practical for him. So you're focused on earthly things, your need to look spiritual, or your fleshly wants, whatever it is. And if you've really set your affection on things above, then you're thinking of the eternal. And you're thinking, well, yeah, whatever it is I wanted to do, I can wait 5 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour or whatever it is, and I can help out that other person. And if I help out that other person, then it will show God's love to them, and then maybe they'll be willing to listen to the gospel and be saved. Or maybe they'll be willing to listen to the sound doctrine for their problem, because before they wouldn't listen to me because they say I'm a hypocrite, because I'm talking about how great I am, how spiritual I am, and yet I won't even help them out in a practical way. But if I help them out in a practical way, especially going out of my way, well then I have the opportunity to be that ambassador for Christ. And it's not like you got to do some glorious thing. It could be somebody who is paralyzed, like my grandfather was, and you just go and you help them out for 30 minutes. Or you take a little part out of your day, a few days a week, and you do whatever it is they need you to do. You go stop it, you call them up, see what kind of groceries they need, you go get the groceries. You're doing an earthly thing, but you're doing it to show God's love to them so that they may believe the gospel and be saved, or they can get sound doctrine in the inner man and grow in the knowledge of the truth. And so because your motivation then is that, what you're doing is you're thinking on heavenly things. You're setting aside your earthly things, and you're thinking of what's going to be eternal, what's going to last. And sure, peeling the banana or getting those groceries, that's going to fade away in eternity. They're not going to have that banana. They're not going to have those groceries in eternity. But what they will have is the demonstration of God's love that came through you to them. And so then when you talk about spiritual things, instead of saying, oh, he's so heavenly minded, he's no earthly good, or what a hypocrite, he says he does all these things for God and he won't even get me some groceries when he, take 10 minutes out of his day to do that. And so then this spiritual impact of you not helping them out practically is that there's no reward in heaven for you or for that person being saved or coming into the knowledge of the truth through you. So setting your affection on things above doesn't mean you're no earthly good. It's actually quite the opposite. It's that you are doing things on this earth in a very practical way so that others will see the spiritual needs that they have and trust in the sound doctrine you give them to help them with those spiritual needs. If we're to walk by faith and not by sight, and everybody else is walking by sight, well then they will need a demonstration in a physical, practical way of Christ living in you before they'll believe the spiritual stuff, because they're walking by sight. So they're not seeing the spiritual greatness of going to church or doing all these other things. You need to help them because they're in their flesh. And so when you do that, then maybe they'll see the spiritual need and they'll see that God's love is coming through you. And so then you're being a good ambassador for Christ. And that's setting your affection on things above. Thanks for watching.